What's up, you guys? We're talking UFC Vegas 104.
Lock and load.
We got a rematch set to take place in the main event. We got ranked middleweight action set here between Roman Dolidze and Marvin Vettori. Dolidze comes in at number 11. Vettori comes in at number 8. And this is a huge spot for both fighters. If you put things into perspective here, of course, Dolidze wants that redemption, but if he wins this fight, he'll then be on a 3-fight winning streak. And at 36 years old, I just don't think that he can afford to take an L right now if he wants to make a run at the title. Right? He has some momentum. He needs to stack this fight on top of the momentum he already had. And when you look at Marvin Vettori, although he's just 31 years old and he has plenty of time to clean things up and make another run here, he doesn't want to go on a 2-fight losing skid. All right. And this division right now, the middleweight division, is as stacked as ever. Of course, everyone's talking about DDP taking on Khamzat Chimaev. That's the fight that needs to be made. Nasruddin Imavov is on fire right now. You got fighters like Caio Borralho. Take a look at what Anthony Hernandez has been doing. He's been on fire too. Jack Hermansson's coming off a big victory over Joe Pyfer. Joe Pyfer is a name that you guys still have to pay very close attention to. Roman Kopylov is in the mix. Reinier de Ridder is rumored to potentially be getting matched up with Bo Nickel, but de Ridder, he joined the UFC and he is now 2-0 in it, coming off another victory over Kevin Holland. We're talking about Kevin Holland, right? I've been fading Kevin Holland. I backed RDR there. I backed Dolidze over Holland, and I've been putting some money in my pocket. All right, guys, so just a little preview there. We won't dive into any of the other fights. We're going to do that as we get into the video. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and I'll let you guys know right now, especially for you little hater that was in the comment section. And of course, I say that just joking around, but I think you're actually a longtime supporter. But, you know, people have been saying how I've been promising big things for a long time and I'm not really delivering. But if you take a look at the growth of my channel, and there's a lot of things that I haven't been able to talk about, but I am happy to announce to you guys that my biggest project that I've been working on behind the scenes should unravel within the month. And once it's rolling and gets that traction, it's going to be the #1 MMA show out. How about that? Right? Give it a year, give it 2 years. But I'm telling you guys, the concept of what I'm going to have going on here, I think it will be the #1 MMA show in the game, and specifically with the betting twist on it. But it won't strictly be a betting show. Okay. It's going to be a general MMA show with that betting twist added to it. But I cannot wait to show you guys what I have coming. So, you know, for all you that have been patient with me, thank you very much. And I won't hold you guys up anymore. We're going to jump into the first fight. Thanks everyone for hitting that like button, subscribing. Go catch me on my social media. That's down there below. And if anybody wants to work with me for my official targets for this card, you guys know you can email me or shoot me a DM on IG or Twitter. Let's go jump into the first fight.
The teller.
We head over to the women's bantamweight division, where I think the UFC did a good job matching these two girls up with each other. Josiane Nunes taking on Priscila Cachoeira. These are two fighters that have proved to not be the most well-rounded. Specifically, they struggle with their grappling. Priscilla is a fighter that tends to get finished and subbed down there, while Nunes will just be controlled and she'll lose rounds. But one thing that they do show in a positive light is that they do have plus power for the division. Their striking isn't bad. And I'm interested to see who gets the better of those exchanges on the feet, because we should get to see a good amount of them. Cachoeira is a fighter that has showed to be lacking more defensively. Although the numbers are skewed, you see that she's absorbing 7.03 strikes per minute. Remember, I think she took that fight on short notice too against Valentina Shevchenko in her UFC debut. She was just mollywopped in that fight. So the stats are always going to be skewed for the rest of her career for what happened in that fight. It was brutal. And after that performance, you have to give her some credit because she's had some big KO victories. We'll talk about those in a second, but it's not like Nunes is very sharp defensively either, because she's absorbing more strikes than she's landing, but she has shown to put more output with her volume offensively. And if I have to lean towards either fighter's way, I'm going to say that Nunes gets the better of the striking. I've been a little bit more pleased with the fluidity of her striking, whereas Cachoeira will land those big KOs here and there, but I don't see her being as offensively smooth. So if we don't see that KO, I could just see Nunes outpointing her. And even though Nunes is the shorter fighter, she actually has about a 2-inch reach advantage. So, you know, we're strictly talking about how the fight would take place if it takes place standing. That's not a guarantee. If we do see one of these fighters looking to change levels and get a takedown, I do feel that it would be Priscila. Not that she's typically gone down that route, but if she's clearly losing the exchanges there, I could see her changing levels. And I don't know how much faith you could have in Nunes, although she's just 31. We just had a little video up of her working on her takedown defense, even threatening with the sub. Maybe we see something like that happen. Maybe Priscila shoots in sloppily and Nunes snatches up a Tony Ferguson type Darce. You never know. All in all, I do feel more comfortable backing Josiane Nunes. And this is a fighter that I would really like to see put it together to an extent. Okay, I think she's a fun fighter, and she needs to put it together, man. She's only 31. So we take a look at the line. She is a minus 220 over on BetUS. And you guys know I got to shout out my partners over there. If anyone's looking to sign up to a new sports book, I highly recommend BetUS. If you guys are looking to do that, let me know. I'll give you an additional gift as well. But BetUS is the real deal. They'll give you some amazing deposit matches when you start up over there. So keep that in mind. But you take a look at the line here. Minus 220 on Nunes. Do I feel comfortable taking her at a line like this? No, I don't. And this is going to be a very similar narrative going throughout this card because there's a lot of big favorites. Okay, forget about minus 220. There's a lot of big favorites all throughout this card, and I'm not in agreement with the lines on a lot of them. Okay, I think a lot of these fights are closer than the line states. Now, I like Nunes to win a decision here, but minus 220, man, no, I'm not coughing that up. We got one of the biggest favorites on the card here in Seung Yu. He's taking on AJ Cunningham. And it's important to note, I do believe this fight's taking place in the featherweight division, but if you go over to the UFC's website, for some reason it's listed as a bantamweight bout, which would really make no sense to me because AJ Cunningham, although he has fights that have taken place down at 145, including his first bout on Dana White's Contender Series, he's fought at lightweight often, and his last two fights, I believe, were at 155. I just don't see him coming down to 135 here. I know that Yu has fought in the bantamweight division, but I think it's much more realistic that they're meeting in the middle here. So it should be taking place in the featherweight division. Cunningham is going to have a size advantage. That's important to note here. Yu is the more polished striker. I like what I've seen from him over on the road to UFC, and I like what I saw with him in his UFC debut. He's a technical striker, and he should be more polished and clean there. What's interesting here is that Cunningham, I would say, although he's very tough, okay, he's a tough, durable fighter. Even if you take a look at the shots that were landed on him by Ludwig Klein, even though he was finished in the first round, he still looked pretty durable in there, man. He was getting hit with everything but the kitchen sink. Eventually, it was a body shot that shut him down. Stephen Wynn finished him in the second round there when he was cutting weight down to this weight class. Stephen Wynn is a fighter that never really lived up to some of the hype that some people had for him. Champion on the regional scene there, and he did bounce back with a KO there. But Cunningham is just, he's a tough dude, but he's sloppy, and I think that Yu is going to be much more technical than him. Now, here's the question mark, right? Yu is not a fight finisher. Specifically when it comes to knocking people out. He's not a fight finisher. He only has 3 documented KOs out of his 14 victories. So is he going to be able to knock Cunningham out? I don't think so. I think that Cunningham's going to keep pressing forward. If you guys know about AJ's backstory, man, he comes from like a wild situation. You guys can dig it up, but I mean, this is a dude that grew up with a lot of hardship around him. So he's tough, man. He's all about taking that pain, and he'll come forward and all that. But I will say that he makes it to the final belt, but I think that Seung Yu is just going to be too polished for him. Now, as we get to the betting line, because it's a little ridiculous to me, man, I would definitely not be coughing up 7-1 odds. This is a fight that is much closer. The value, without a doubt, is on AJ Cunningham at plus 475. With his size advantage, the way he'll be pressuring, if he can make things ugly in there, there's a way that he could win a split decision or just somehow sneak off 2 rounds. I don't think he's going to have enough success changing levels and getting takedowns. We'll see about that as well, but Yu's been working on that aspect of his game. This line is ludicrous, though. This is an absurd line. Maybe I'll be eating my words here. Maybe Seung Yu goes out there and just starches him in the first round, and he looks to be deserving of this type of line. But going into it with the question marks of the size, and then you also take into consideration that Yu is not really proven. He hasn't fought high-level competition. So how is he going to look in a spot like this? I mean, who's out there just tagging that line to push it up like that? I don't know. We'll see about that. I will say that the Korean wins a unanimous decision here. We got a battle of the Ultimate Fighter versus Dana White's Contender Series here, as Carlos Vera, a tough alum, takes on a recent DWCS alum in Josias Musasa. Musasa, known as the KO Wizard. He had knocked out every single opponent he faced off against before that DWCS fight, and that fight went to a decision. And I'll tell you guys what, it was a little bit of a controversial decision. A lot of people thought that he shouldn't have got the nod. He did land some damaging strikes, but he was touched up quite a bit and controlled throughout that fight. And if you felt he should have lost, you're not going to get an argument from me here. You take a look at these numbers. These numbers are strictly based off of that fight. Okay, so he was outlanded 4.53 to 3.33, but he landed the damaging strikes. And I'll say this, even though he dropped that fight, I think he still showed us what he's about. And I do believe with time, he'll start to land those KOs in the octagon. I mean, he really shows some raw ability and killer instinct in there. He's just 26 years old. Couple important factors I want to bring up here. Otar Tanzilov, he fought a very tactical fight in that match. And even though he's a Georgian fighter, a lot of Georgian fighters have high-level grappling, he's more of a striking-based fighter. All right, so I do have question marks of how Musasi is going to look when he fights against a fighter that has a little bit of a higher level with the grappling. And Vera has sharp BJJ, doesn't have the best wrestling, but if Vera gets this fight down to the mat, how is Musasa going to look down there with him? You take a look at some of the work that he was doing before he even fought on The Ultimate Fighter. He was stringing off a lot of subs, okay, and he does show to be pretty polished there. So I think there is a route to victory if Vera can get that fight down to the mat, but I don't think it's going to be easy for Vera to get this fight to the mat. I'm favoring Musasa, not only stuffing a lot of the takedowns, but even if he gets taken down for a second, he bumps back up and starts to land damaging strikes. He can solidify rounds like that. I think he's live for the KO. In fact, I'm going to take him to get a knockout here. Even though Vera has never been KO'd before, 37 years old, this dude Musasa hits hard, man. We saw it. Now, the only other question mark you could kind of have about Musasa is the fact that you heard Dana White talking about how he wants him to come over to the States and start training with some high-level coaches and surround himself with some of the best fighters in the world. I don't believe he's taken that route. That's why I showed that video as we started this segment off. I think he's still over in Africa. And you take a look at the gyms that he's training in. I don't know who he's surrounding himself with and what kind of coaching he's getting, but he has the raw abilities. And even with that type of coaching that he's getting, I think that he still will look good here. And I'm going to say he gets the KO, okay? But even if he doesn't get the KO, he could still win this fight. It's not like he is solely reliant on getting a knockout, okay? He can win a decision here. He could definitely solidify rounds with the damage. Now let's take a look at the line. This should be an interesting one, and it damn sure is. He's a minus 500 right now. He's a 5-1 favorite. Remember what I told you guys. There's a lot of very high lines throughout this card that could potentially be traps. This is another fight that could potentially be a trap. All right. He could look like a fish out of water down the mat. Not only can he look like a fish out of water if the fight plays out for the long haul, but he could just get subbed. Vera might get on his back and pull off a rear naked choke. If he gets it down there, he may just show to be light years ahead of Musasa. Okay, so that's the X factor. I am not in agreement with the line. We'll see how it plays out. Could be a fight that we talk about in the prop edition video. In the strawweight division, we have Sam Hughes taking on Stephanie Luciano. Luciano looked great in her UFC debut. It was a rematch of the same fight that she had on DWCS. That fight went to a draw against Talita Al-Ansar, the high-level BJJ player there. You gotta love the way that Luciano showed so much growth. She goes into the rematch and completely flips the script. Okay, it wasn't going to be a fight that played out closely. This was a fight that was a 30-27 unanimous decision. She outstruck her almost 2-1, and she also controlled Al-Ansar down on the mat for 1 minute and 10 seconds compared to the 38 seconds that she was controlled where she was hit with 1 takedown, but out of 10 attempts. Okay, so you see her sharpening up there. I think that Luciano is a fighter that really shows solid promise. She's just 25 years old. She trains at a smaller fight team over there in Brazil. That's one thing that I was taking a look at. I would like to see her surround herself with some more high-level fighters. We were just recently talking about that in that last fight. But Sam Hughes, man, I'll quickly just talk about Sam Hughes because even though we look at her like she's a fighter that's been around for quite some time, because she kind of has, but she's still only 32 years old. She's in her prime years right now. The 9-6 record is not completely indicative of who she is. She's had some pretty solid victories. I know Elise Reed is not a fighter that a lot of people are very high on, but what a performance that was, man. She broke her down and smashed her up, mounted her, right, and hit her with the elbow. She ground and pound finish her. She went out there, defeated Jacqueline Amorum. She's coming off a split decision over Victoria Dudakova. You take a look at the losses, they're somewhat respectable. Yasmin Gergi, she continues to lose, but we know that she does have a solid talent. Piera Rodriguez was a loss. Luana Pinero, Lume Lekbunmi, Tisha Pennington, Vanessa Demopoulos. You're only going to see recognizable names there. But that's the type of fighter that she is. She still will lose to those types of fighters. And I think that already from what I'm seeing from Luciano, she's on that level. Okay. Doesn't have a lot of pro experience, just 8 pro fights. That's the thing you got to be cautious about, but she moves very well. She's a solid athlete. She'll have a 2-inch reach advantage here. I expect her to get the better of the striking exchanges, even though Hughes is solid with her striking too. I expect Luciano to show that work that she's been working on, stuffing takedowns, keep this fight standing where she'll get the better. And I do like the youngster to get a big feather in her cap, taking out a veteran there. And this is another fight where we're going to take a look at the line. She's a -250. Are you trusting this youngster at a line like this? I don't like the value on Luciana. I mean, it may be every single fight that I say this for. So stick around with me, and it'll be interesting because I'm just telling you how I feel. You may not like this type of feedback, man, but you guys know how it goes here. I'm going to keep it real with you. I'm going to tell you how I feel about the betting odds here. And even though I like Luciano to win a decision, I think you're crazy if you're coughing up -250. I just don't like that at all. The value is all over Sam Hughes, which she is as high as a +206, okay? And keep an eye on that line too. Maybe people even start to steam Luciano even more so. We see action come in on her and you grab Hughes right around a +240 or something like that, 250. That's a bargain. But give me Luciano via decision. Yeah, Nessie Duben makes her UFC debut. She'll be taking on Carli Judice. If you guys forgot about the performance that Duben had on the show this past season, I mean, it was spectacular. You probably have to have that ranked as the best performance that we've ever seen from a female fighter on the show. I mean, she went out there and landed an overhand haymaker KO as a huge underdog, right? Getting the contract. I mean, you got to give her some credit there. Carli Judice also had a phenomenal performance on the show. Her fight went a little differently though, right? She went to war with Ernesta Kericate, right? And that was a fight that she lost via split decision. That fight could have really went either way. We tip our hat to both fighters for the performance that they put on there. And Ernesta Kericate just had a solid victory in the octagon. She's proving to be a good fighter. Okay, so that went to a split. You look at Judice's most recent fight that was against Gabriela Fernandez. Fernandez just had a huge victory where she went out there and subbed Kong Wang after landing a big strike on Wang as well. So, and then if you take a look at the level of competition on her losses too, Teresa Bleda and Jasmine Jasudavicius. So, I mean, I think Gabriela Fernandez is a good fighter. And I think that the fact that she went to a split with her kind of shows you the level of ability that she has. She's just 26 years old. I believe she was a former softball player in college. Okay, so she's a real athlete. And I think that with time, she's going to prove to be a very legitimate UFC fighter. I really do. I think when you take a look at her when she's like 30 years old, she'll be legitimate. She doesn't have a lot of experience right now, but with time, she'll look very good. And I'm very impressed with how good she's looked from a technical standpoint so early on in her mixed martial arts career. All right, take a look at the numbers too. These numbers are crazy. We'll just get a quick laugh at this. 11.23 strikes landed while absorbing 10.1. That she goes out there and she puts it all on the line. And you take a look at Duben landing 20.55 while absorbing 11.51, and that's based off that fight that lasted for a minute there. But this is the issue I have with Duben. Duben, if you take a look at the level of competition that she's been facing off with, all right, leading up to that DWCS fight, all of these fighters that she's going out there and finishing in the first and second rounds, all right, they are making their pro debuts. They're 0-0, 0-0, 0-0, all right? All right, so we're talking about very low level competition. And then the fact that she landed that KO so quickly, we still didn't really get to see what she's about. Yeah, we can probably assume that she has good power, but good luck to you if you're banking on a female fighter to go out there and land an overhand right to get the KO victory. Good luck to you, because how is she going to look as the fight progresses? We know that Carli Judice will will push, and she'll pick the pace up as the fight goes. She's a solid athlete, and you know you're going to see a step up in her skill set here as she's just 26 years old. I also like the fact that Judice has a 3-inch reach advantage. And this fight's been a little funny to me because I've been seeing a lot of people talking about how Duben should be the favorite. I think on Tapology, more people are picking Duben to win this fight than Judice. People are hating on Judice. And, you know, that's the difference, man. For people that actually do their homework, you understand that Judice is a promising fighter, and you don't really put her under the magnifying glass just because she's 0-2 since fighting under the UFC banner. No, actually dissect those performances. So I do like Judice, and let's take a look at the line here, where she is going to be the favorite. Now we could talk about the line because the fact that she's a -500 is a little crazy. And yes, I know a lot of you guys are probably thinking, what? She's a -500. Who's talking about Duben being the better fighter or Duben getting her hand raised here? Go put your ears to the street because people are siding with Duben. I'm telling you, I've seen a lot of it. All right. So I like Judice. I'm going to say the same thing once again, guys. Look, I'm sitting here, I'm in the lab, and I'm letting you guys know. We'll see how long we can keep this streak going. This line is somewhat absurd. The value, without a doubt, is on Duben. And if anyone's targeting her from a +370 all the way up to as high as a +400 on some of these books, that would be the right move. But, I mean, let's see how she looks, man. She's carrying excess weight. You see, this is a picture of her going into that last fight. And maybe she cleans up her diet a little bit more, so that would probably be a good thing for her because I don't know how she's going to look in those later rounds. So Ryan Spann has decided to take his talents up to the heavyweight division, and he's getting an instant ranked fighter here in Waldo Cortes-Acosta, who's ranked number 12. And he's coming off that big upset performance where he grappled Robelis Despain. And Despain, he went over to Karate Combat, and he's been making a scene over there. Obviously, that type of setup is a lot more fitting for his style. But let's give Acosta a little bit of credit for fighting a tactical fight and showing some development, if you will, with his overall mixed martial arts abilities. That was a smart fight. He showed high fight IQ, showed he can get some takedowns, and he rained off control time on Despain. Now, I think maybe there's a lot of fighters in this division that could have done that if they could have got in on the hips and have got the fight there. But it's a lot easier said than done to get to that point, okay? Because before that, you really got to close the distance on some danger there. And I will give him some credit for that. Before that, decision victory over André Arlovski. He knocked out Lucas Brzeski. The Marcos Rogério de Lima loss that he had, which was his only loss since joining the UFC. That was a fight where his legs were chewed up. All right, he really showed that he's a little too heavy on that front foot. He's a solid boxer. Right? He comes from a baseball background, I believe, as well, but he has solid boxing. I like his hands, and I think that he can have success on Spann here using his hands. Now, Spann's dangerous too. He carries a lot of power going up in weight. I expect that power to come with him. But you guys know that Spann does suffer from slow motion syndrome, okay? And we've seen it throughout the years. He's had his up and down type of performances. But one thing that we've kind of seen consistently is that he does suffer from that slow motion syndrome, that SMS, all right? Because you take a look at the Anthony Smith fights, even if you want to argue he should have got his hand raised in the rematch against Anthony Smith. I mean, these dudes are fighting in slow motion. We've seen him kind of just get caught looking at his work, man. He throws these huge haymakers, and he's just like frozen there, and he's there to be countered on. And he starts to just breathe heavily and starts to slow down, and he just looks all lethargic in there. We've seen that throughout the years. Even if you want to mention fights like the Sam Alvey fight, he got his hand raised against Sam Alvey, and that wasn't even really that much of an impressive performance. He was a huge favorite and slowed down in that fight. He's been knocked out before by fighters like Johnny Walker, was submitted by Anthony Smith the first time around. We talked about the recent Bogdan Guskov KO loss, and I understand that he had a solid bounce back victory over OSP where he subbed him within just like a minute and a half. But OSP's way up there in age, and yeah, you know, I will give credit to Spann. I will mention the fact that Spann has a nasty sub arsenal. Right? We've seen him go out there from even dating back to the regional scene. If you guys have been keeping up with him from back then, I mean, he's been going out there subbing dudes for a long time. We've never seen Acosta subbed thus far. I do think that Spann will have an edge there. He's the more refined fighter down in the mat, but I think this fight's gonna remain standing. I think that Acosta has shown that he's learning the overall game. I can see him stuffing takedowns, and as he keeps this fight standing, I think his boxing's more polished. It's just a little bit more tight. It's more crisp. It's quicker. All right, he puts more volume out there with the strikes, landing 5.64 strikes compared to Spann's 3.3. And I don't trust Spann in the later rounds. I could actually see, and I will actually pick Waldo Cortes-Acosta to get a KO here. I am going to pick him to get a KO. Spann gets, he puts himself in these positions, man, where he's there to be finished. Even in some of these fights where he's pushed through it and he's even got his hand raised, he's still been vulnerable defensively. And I think that Acosta, without a doubt, will be the best version that we've ever seen from him at 33 years old, getting into the MMA game a little bit later. Now you're really going to start to see him take that next step. And I like him to win this fight. Now he's a minus 175. We're finally talking about a decently respectable line, but you could even argue that he shouldn't be as high as a minus 175 because Spann's still dangerous. But, you know, I might have to break the streak here. I'll say that this is a very accurate line. I have this fight capped with Acosta being a minus 175. That's basically where I have this line. So it's an accurate one. I'm going to side with Acosta to get the KO. Wouldn't be shocked if it goes to a decision and he still gets his hand raised. You're not going to want to miss this fight right here. I have this penciled in as possibly my most anticipated match of the event. In the flyweight division, we got André Lima taking on Daniel Barez. There's about a decade of difference in their age, but Barez is coming off his most impressive victory as a pro, where he went out there and defeated Victor Altamirano. If you were to take a look at the numbers, you may think it was somewhat of a close fight, but it really wasn't as close as the numbers say. You look at the total strikes, 78 to 76. Just 2 extra strikes landed by Barez, but there was a clear difference in the amount of damage landed. And we saw that Barez is very sharp with his boxing skills. Okay, when he can keep a fight standing, I'm very high on his striking abilities. Now, before the Altamirano fight, he did have a disappointing performance where he was subbed by Rafael Filho in the first round, got caught in that arm triangle choke. So he showed to be a little deficient down on the mat, even though we know Rafael is pretty talented down there. Take a look at the work that he did before that. He was on a 4-fight winning streak, finishing fights left and right in the first round. And that was after the DWCS fight he had against Carlos Hernandez. That fight went to a split decision. I thought that he won that fight. It was close. I thought that he won that fight. He could have got the contract back then. And in fact, I really feel he should have. All right, even with the loss, I mean, he was deserving to be an addition to this division even back then. What makes this fight very interesting is the fact that I have Lima rated as a very high kickboxer, which some of you guys have given me slack about in the past. For whatever reason, I feel like André Lima gets a lot of hate, and people have given me hate for supporting him or for praising him. I mean, he moves like a video game character. I use that reference once in a while. He is very fast. And of course, in the flyweight division, we see that more often. You could say Barez, with his boxing skills, he moves a little bit like a video game character. But Lima is a high-level kickboxer. Even though he's not going out there and knocking dudes out, that doesn't mean that they won't start to come eventually. And that also doesn't mean that he's very high level with what he's doing. Okay. And if you take a look at some of his performances, okay, since the decision victory over Rickson Zenedem, who Zenedem was undefeated at the time, right? He gets the contract, right? He goes out there. And I think this is where all the hatred started to come, right? Because people had money locked in on Igor Severino. I have to believe that was the case. And some people actually believe that Severino was going to win that fight if it wasn't for the bite, which is not true. All right, Lima was taking that fight over. He was starting to stuff the takedowns. He was a step ahead. He was landing the cleaner strikes. Severino was getting frustrated, and that's why he did what he did. And what a shame that he did what he did, because he would have been another great addition, right? He was a young, undefeated fighter. He's so promising. I know he's fighting over, I think, in Octagon now, and he already had a victory since that. Yeah, he fought over at Octagon 65, and he's scheduled to fight at Octagon 70 against Jack Cartwright, former Dana White's Contender Series fighter there. So I don't know if the UFC will ever give Severino another opportunity. Most likely not after he did what he did. But I mean, you take a look at the Rapasso fight that Lima had after that. That fight went to a split decision. It was far from a split decision. One judge was on something there, and that was Dave Terrelli, who scored a 29-28. That was absolute blasphemy. The other two judges had it right. It was 30-27. Lima doubled him up on strikes. All right, Rapasso was only 1 of 2 on his takedown attempts, and he had 9 seconds of control time, where Lima also had 9 seconds of control time. I like the fact that Lima is showcasing different elements of his fight game, because he took that performance and parlayed it into the Felipe dos Santos fight, where I was very pleased with what I saw. He didn't go out there and engage in a striking affair with the technical and dangerous youngster Felipe dos Santos. All right, he flipped it up on him and used his grappling skills to show that he's developing as the more well-rounded fighter. He took him down, big brothered Felipe Dos Santos. He bullied him down in the mat, controlled him, gave him noogies down there. And Lima shows to have a high fight IQ, right? He takes the path of least resistance. That's what you want in a fighter when you're backing him. When you have money on him on a money line, you want him to take that type of path. You don't want him to face danger if you want to cash there. So, and if you're a fighter like Lima who wants to make a run at the belt and you want to continuously win fights, that's what you do. So you look at this matchup here and you got to wonder, is Lima going to look to change levels and look to take Barez down? Because Barez is dangerous with his boxing skills. I think that very well could be the case. But even in a fight where we see them strike it out and it takes place for 15 minutes with them throwing down, I still see Lima as the more complete striker. I see him mixing in the kicks and just his overall arsenal a little bit better than Barez. And even though Barez looked great in that last fight, he's still, and he's in his late 30s while Lima's 26. You got to expect to see those strides in Lima's game. You got to expect to see him even look better and better and better. And I think that he's a fighter that will have a number next to his name in the near future. And he's a fighter that can make a run in this division. So I'm still sitting here preaching to you guys how Lima is a very promising fighter. So hit the comment section up if you guys disagree with me. I know some of you guys do, but I like what I'm seeing from Lima, man. This dude checks off a lot of boxes for me. And I think that he goes out there and defeats Barez, and the fight can go a couple different ways, but it still will benefit him. Now, take a look at this line. We're having that same conversation. Once again, I like Lima a lot, but he shouldn't be a minus 280 here. There's no question he should not be a 280. Barez needs to get a little bit more respect put on his name after that performance he just had. He's a plus 230 right now. That's where the value is. That's where the value is. There's no question about it. This could be a fight that plays out pretty damn close. It can go to a split decision. And I wouldn't want to be chalking up minus 280 on Lima there, but give me Lima to win this fight via decision. I don't know if I could think of a loss that has aged as well as the Kevin Vallejos loss to Gene Silva on Dana White's Contender Series. That went to a decision. He didn't get the nod. You take a look at the numbers here. Vallejos was outstruck 87-71, but he showed so much toughness in that fight, so much durability. And if you guys remember, he settled in as a hefty favorite. I think he was right around a 2-1 favorite, right around a minus 220, 230. And he showed out. He showed that he's a promising prospect. He was very young at the time. He's still young. He's 23 years old. He's taking on Seung Choi here. Choi has been going through a lot of adversity in the cage, and I think that he's in a tough spot here. Right? He's 32 years old. He's in his physical prime, but he's coming off the Steve Garcia KO loss. He did sneak in a win against Jarno Irenz, who's not a bad fighter, but look at the fight he had before that. He got finished by Mike Trezano. All right, that's not a good look for you there. Losses to Alex Caceres and Joshua Holobaugh before that. Holobaugh just recently got cut by the UFC. Things have not been looking good. And if you think back in the day, there was one point in time where Choi had some real momentum and people were respecting what he was doing. All right, after a slow start to his UFC career, he lost to Movsar Evlovoyov and Gavin Tucker. We kind of looked at those performances like, okay, those were respectable fighters. Look what he's starting to do now. He was on a 3-fight winning streak, defeated Yusuf Zalal. He finished Julian Erosa, but things fell off the tracks after that. And I don't think he's going to be able to take the offense that Vallejos is going to throw at him. You take a look at that Vallejos fight that he just had against Cam Teague, which Cam Teague is another fighter that's a little tall and rangy for the division. And Cam Teague just bounced back with the big victory. He had a first-round finish after taking the loss here, which makes it even look that much more impressive. But Vallejos just came at him like a bat out of hell, broke him down. And I think that Vallejos is going to immediately charge Choi when the bell rings. And I don't have a lot of faith that Choi is going to be able to withstand it. And I don't really have a lot of faith in Choi being able to fire anything back that's going to stop the fight or get enough respect from Vallejos. We've seen Choi land some big strikes throughout the years, but nothing to the degree of what we've seen Gene Silva throw out there. All right. So Vallejos took all that. I think that Vallejos takes anything Choi throws at him here. I think that he's the better overall mixed martial artist, but this fight probably takes place on the feet for the entirety of it. And Vallejos gets a TKO stoppage or maybe even a one-shot snipe. Maybe he sleeps Choi. We'll see how it goes, but I definitely want to be on the Vallejos side with him getting a stoppage in this fight. Just with the pace that he pushes, I really feel that he will find it. Take a look at this. He's landing 6.85 strikes per minute compared to the 3.51 of Choi. That's the type of fighter that he is. He's a young, hungry fighter. I'll repeat myself once again. With these young fighters, you're going to see that rapid growth in their game. Vallejos is a fighter that will be very, very dangerous when he's 26, 27, 28 years old. Forget about it. He's going to be a very dangerous fighter, and he already is a very dangerous fighter. He's going to get the stoppage on Choi in this spot here. And we take a look back, right? He was a minus 205 against Gene Silva, came in as a 5-1 favorite against Cam Teague, the undefeated Cam Teague. So the word is out. There's a lot of respect on his abilities. Obviously, people are expecting big things from him. And right now he is, let's take a look at the line here. Vallejos is a minus 360. I'm not going to sit here and say that this is another line that's way too high. I'm not, because this is one that's kind of warranted. I just feel it's a safer target for such a high line. Choi's going to have to land that KO, and I just don't see him landing it. I don't think that Choi really brings a threat with the grappling to Vallejos. It'll be nothing that Vallejos hasn't seen any there thus far, and he's already checked off those boxes to a degree anyway, so it's kind of a safe target. I like Vallejos to win this fight, and this could be a fight that we're talking about in the prop edition video. Maybe we're looking at a KO prop or something like that. At 155, we have who I would refer to as an underachiever in Alexander Hernandez. He's taking on Holobaugh, who I would refer to as an overachiever, right? When you take a look at their overall careers. I mean, Alexander Hernandez came in, I believe, on short notice against Beneil Dariush and just starched him. If you guys all remember that, knocked him out in just 42 seconds, followed that up with a victory over OAM. That was impressive. Even though that fight was competitive, OAM is a fighter that we know is very polished and professional. And then things started to fall off the tracks. It all started with that Cowboy Cerrone fight where he started yapping at the mouth at the press conference, and then Cerrone shut him down, bloodied him up, and just beat him into smithereens. The Trinaldo fight should have been an L. I believe that fight has the record for the least amount of strikes landed. I think it was like 2-1, and it was in Hernandez's hometown in Texas. He had the crowd behind him, and Trinaldo should have won that fight just based off the fact he never landed one strike in his hometown. Gets knocked out by Dober after that. Bounces back with the performance over Chris Grutzmacher, a low-level fighter who is not a UFC caliber fighter. So take that for what you will. He did look very good in that fight. Showcased some striking abilities, but when you take a look at his victories towards the latter half of his career, I mean, it's mostly against lower-level fighters, or when you're talking about a Jim Miller, you're talking about a very aged Jim Miller, and that was a competitive fight too. But then there's just L's all over the place. Bill Algeo defeated him, Damon Jackson, Hanato Moicano, Billy Q. And some of these losses were like alarming. The Billy Q loss, that was a very bad performance. All right. So on the other hand, Holobaugh, now I could just kind of say this, but at the time, for those of you guys that were tuning into my Ultimate Fighter recaps, if you guys remember, I was doing that. I knew that Holobaugh was going to win that show from the very beginning. I had a little source. Obviously, it's all pre-recorded. I knew Holobaugh was the winner. So it's kind of funny as I was breaking down this season, breaking down episode to episode, just watching. I already knew that Holobaugh or he was going to make it to the finale, right? So I thought he looked very good on the show, although it was against lesser of competition. Not a lot of big names there. You're talking Jason Knight, Lee Hammond, Conor McGregor's boy, who never turned out to be anything. He just took another L. All right, not a lot of respectable names, okay, but you still had to be impressed with the way that he went out there and performed. Especially for a fighter that's up in age, man. He still has that desire. He's well-rounded. He can break you down, ground and pound you. He can stand on the feet with you and slug it out. He's not the most technical, but if you're slowing down, he'll push you up against the cage. He'll work the body. Right? He's a real fighter. The Austin Hubbard victory was a solid one there. He got the submission. And you take a look at the other two fights, right? Trey Ogden is a fighter that I rate pretty high. He's an under-the-radar type of fighter. He's not the most athletic and flashy, but he's game, and he's very technical and intelligent. And you take that loss for what it is, and you have to like the bounce back victory he just had over an up and comer in Kainan Kruszewski, who came off DWCS. Holobaugh outstruck him 171 to 115, controlled him for 5 minutes and 21 seconds, showcasing the grappling abilities as well. And although Hernandez has abilities there, I would actually lean towards Holobaugh being slightly better. I don't know. I just don't have a lot of faith in Hernandez. We'll see how he looks. I know Hernandez is the younger fighter, probably I don't know, you could argue that, but maybe the more hungry fighter. This is like do or die for him. But you could kind of say the same thing for Holobaugh because of him being 38. If he loses this, he's probably cut from the UFC. So both fighters are very hungry. I think that Holobaugh is more of a dog and just rises to the occasion more than a Hernandez. Hernandez constantly flops. I feel more comfortable backing Holobaugh here. And you guys know I had to throw a dog your guys' way eventually here. I mean, we had to pick a dog, and I like Holobaugh. You take a look at the numbers, very similar. In fact, there's a lot of similarities between both these fighters, just not as far as their age goes. Okay, Holobaugh is getting up there in age, but still looks to be in great shape. And I think a plus 166 line next to his name is definitely where the value is. And I think that this fight should be like a pick'em fight. And I'll side with Holobaugh pushing through adversity and just being a step ahead of Hernandez in a close one. I'll say Holobaugh wins via split decision. Wait till we get to the line on this one. In the bantamweight division, Blackshear takes on Cody Gibson. Gibson has a lot of similarities to Kurt Holobaugh, as they're fighters that had initial stints with the UFC. They had their ups and downs. They went to the regional scene, worked their way back into the octagon, and have actually had some success. Okay, Cody Gibson's a tough dude. Blackshear, on the other hand, he has plus grappling abilities, man, plus submission skills. You take a look at his 15 victories, 10 of them come by way of sub, and he's been in there pulling off all types of subs. You think about the twister that he landed on Jose Johnson. You would have to run the tape back to the Korean Zombie versus Leonard Garcia, I believe, to see something like that taking place in the octagon. Maybe I'm missing one or two of them that have happened. If you guys know of any other twisters, hit the comment section below. But that's a very hard move to pull off in the octagon. Just went out there and subbed Cody Stamen, hit him with the rear naked choke. And if you scroll down a bit, you'll see that he did go to a draw with Youssef Zalal. Zalal's been on fire, just getting his hand raised continuously. So that draw and that fight overall was kind of a good look for him. I lost to Farid Basharat. Farid Basharat looking to be a much more promising fighter compared to Javid. Javid has fallen off a cliff, of course, as he recently just got brutally KO'd. But Farid is a talented fighter, and he did knock out Luan Lacerda before that. So, I mean, a lot of up and down performances. I have to highlight the fact that he was just brutally KO'd by Montel Jackson in 18 seconds. That was an official play of mine. I was going crazy when that took place. You guys know I am high on Montel Jackson, even though he's not an active fighter. So the level of opponent's not bad, but the way he went out, that is alarming. Mario Batista defeated him, and Batista's a winner too. So Blackshear is all over the place with his performances, but I still would lean towards him being a solid UFC caliber fighter. He has the age advantage here. Cody Gibson comes into this fight on a 2-fight winning streak, and you got to give him credit for going out there and finishing one of my old arch nemesis and Brian Kelleturd. All right, give him credit for that. Went out there and subbed him like he should have. Followed that up with a victory over Chad and Hellinger. Okay, lower level fighters there. Before that, he loses to Miles Johns and Brad Katona. I think that you do kind of have to note that the victories were lower level over Chad and Brian, so don't put too much merit into them. Damon is a step above those fighters there, and I think that Damon will show that when you see these guys in the octagon, you'll see that it's a little different fighting those guys compared to a Damon. Damon's striking is not bad either. He's athletic. It's not the most technical, but he's working on it. I just have to side with the youth here and Damon, and we also have seen Cody Gibson submitted before with some elementary subs. We've seen him caught in like guillotines by Manny Gambarian back in the day. Remember, he kicked off his UFC career, I believe, fighting Aljamain Sterling. I believe that was his UFC debut. It's kind of funny to think a fighter that ended up becoming a champion and all that. And but I will side with Damon, mostly based off the age. If you were to give me like a prime Cody Gibson and a prime Damon Blackshear, the fight would be much closer. But I'll tell you what, we get over to the betting odds. Take a look at this. Blackshear is a minus 410. All right, I do not believe that he should be this big of a favorite. I think that Cody Gibson's a lot more alive than what this line is saying. You can get Gibson right around a plus 315. I see him as high as a plus 340 on some books. That, without a doubt, is where the value is. He has a little momentum behind him. He's still very hungry to go out there and get his hand raised. He's a hard-nosed fighter. He'll go out there and he'll fight for your money. And do not be surprised if this is a fight that plays out very closely. So why are you chalking up those types of odds? You know what I'm saying? It's just, I don't like it. We have the UFC debut of Diyar Nergozi. He's taking on Brendanson Ribeiro. Now, Nergozi is coming off a huge victory on DWCS where he got the contract. He knocked out Bartosz Seseshik, a teammate of Michał Oleksiejczuk, right? A fellow Polish fighter. Now, a lot of people thought that fight was very close on paper going into it. That's a fight that rings home to me very well because I had a huge official play on Nergoze, and I was high on him. I liked everything that I was seeing from him. He was getting in work over at Team Kill Clef FC going into that bout, and I don't believe that he was training over there going into this one. But Nergoze is a fighter that checks off a lot of boxes. Okay, he's not the most trim, athletic fighter. He's not really quick twitched. He's very measured, and his strikes are thumping. Okay, you take a look at that knockout strike that he landed in that fight on DWCS. It was a head kick knockout. All right, he came from the southpaw stance and whacked the Polish fighter there, Bartos, upside the head like it was a baseball bat. So he showed not only can he strike, not only can he knock you out, but he also can grapple. That's something that I know about him, and I believe he should have a solid advantage there. All right, if we see anyone changing levels, if we see anybody on top of the other person raining down ground and pound, it is going to be Nergoze on top of Ribeiro. Where Ribeiro can be dangerous, as we know, is that he is a huge athlete. Okay, he's lacking technically, but he's explosive, and if he does land on you, I mean, realistically in this division, I mean, he can knock anybody out. I mean, there is that type of potential. We saw what he did to Bruno Lopez on DWCS. We've seen him have his fair share of knockouts on the regional scene before that over in Brazil. But then you take a look at the start to his UFC career. He gets knocked out in just over a minute against Zhang Mingyang. The Magomed Gachiasulov fight, that was a fight that he started off pretty well early on and then got completely dominated as the fight progressed. He was on his back for lengthy periods of time. And then in his last fight, he snuck off a split decision over a lower level Chao Machado. I just don't think that Machado is near the level of a fighter that Nergoze is. Okay, so you just take that into perspective there. And you take a look at some of the work that he's been doing before even getting that DWCS opportunity. He's gone 5 rounds before. Okay, so he's been in grueling fights that have gone to the championship rounds. I like that he checks those boxes off. He'll go out there, he'll knock you out early as well. We've seen him do that over in UAE Warriors. And the level of opposition, it's not horrible. Maybe you're not super familiar with a lot of those names, but some of those guys have decently respectable resumes. And I just think that when you mix it all together, you see that Nergoze is the more polished fighter. He's a fighter with a much higher ceiling, and he should go in here and not only win, I think that he's alive to find a finish. When you look at Ribeiro, he's a fighter that's lost 7 times, and he's been finished in 5 of those 7 fights. Okay, he's been subbed before. He's been knocked out before. I think it's more likely that he gets knocked out. I think that's the way that it's going to go here. I think that Ribeiro will be aggressive, and I could actually see Nergoze welcoming that type of fight. Maybe he doesn't play it smart and just go to the grappling, or he could even get a ground and pound type finish down on the mat. But I think he opens up with the strikes and gets Ribeiro out of there. That's how I see this fight going, and we'll take a look at the betting odds. We have another big favorite. Diyar is a minus 250. It's not as high as some of the other lines that we've seen, and I don't think that this line is out of reach at all. I don't think that it's too high. That's what I'm getting at. I think that it's an accurate line. I feel that he should be a 2.5 to 1 type favorite, and I don't know what it is, but people aren't really putting as much respect on his name as I thought, as I got very familiar with him leading up to that DWCS fight where we had a big target on him. I just, for whatever reason, I feel like people aren't rating him that highly, because I think in a spot like this, you could easily see him entering the cage as like a minus 400 or even opening up as a minus 400. Why not? Ribeiro is low level. We've seen that already. We know that. And maybe for the fact that it's a light heavyweight bout and he shows to have some pop, but I mean, good luck to Ribeiro. I like Nergoze to get a finish and to get his hand raised, and that line's not out of reach. In the welterweight division, we have the long-time warrior, Zaleski dos Santos. This is a guy that just always shows up with his briefcase and looks to go to work, man. A very underrated fighter throughout the years. He's taken on Chidi Njokuani. Njokuani, a fun fighter, right, to watch him perform because he brings in a crazy frame. He has nasty Muay Thai skills. If you're being honest, Njokuani never proved to be well-rounded enough of a fighter to hang with the, I mean, you don't even want to say with the fighters at the top of the game. I'm talking about fighters towards the middle of the road, right? He struggled in those types of fights. I mean, he was finished by Michal Oleksiejczak. Let's not forget about that. And it was the grappling that cost him there. He got taken down in that fight, and Oleksiejczak smashed him up. There's other fights too. Gregory Rodriguez had a takedown in that fight. He ground and pounded, finished him there. He lost to Albert Duryov. That was a fight that was very close, but still took an L there. You date back to the Bellator days where John Salter submitted him in the first round. André Koreshkov finished him up in the first round via ground and pound. Okay, when he falls to his back, when he's taken down in one way or another, he is vulnerable to being finished up down there, and he has a tough time getting up. And I could see Zaleski dos Santos going that route in this fight, and we've seen him do something similar in the past, right? If you want to highlight a fight that he had against Curtis Millender, which I'm not saying that Njokuani is the same level of a fighter of Curtis Millender. Curtis Millender is similar in some ways, though. A big frame, a talented striker. I think Millender was lacking more so with his grappling, but you take a look at the performance that Zaleski had on the night. He went out there, just ripped him down to the mat and subbed him. And he very rarely pulls off submissions, but he can open up with his ground and pound on you as well. And I could see Zaleski dos Santos getting a stoppage down in the mat. I mean, if Oleg Seychak could do it, why can't Zaleski dos Santos do it? And you take a look at some of the performances that he's had throughout the years. It's very underrated when you take a look at the line of work here, man. He went to a split decision with Nicholas Dalby back in the day. One of the very rare losses that he took that was a competitive fight. Victories over Omari Akhmedov, Lyman Good, Max Griffin. He knocked out Sean Strickland. All right, KO'd Luigi Vendramini. I know Vendramini's a nobody, but still, the way he went out there and finished him up, sub Millender like he should have. The Alexei Kunchenko fight was a good one at the time, and the real blemish that he had was when he got KO'd against the Leech. But other than that, even in his losses, they're just so competitive. The Muslim Salikov loss went to a split decision. We know that Muslim's very talented and dangerous with his striking. The Randy Brown fight, that was extremely close. I know it says unanimous decision loss for him there, but that was a fight that could have went either way. All right, I think it came down to that third round. Some people had him winning that fight, and then he bounces back with the first round KO over a fighter making his UFC debut. I believe Scroggin took that fight on short notice. Props to him for stepping in there, but he was completely overmatched. But that fight just showed that even a 38-year-old Zaleski dos Santos will still step into the cage in phenomenal shape, and he'll be very dangerous, and he can knock you out. Okay, so... and we've seen that Njokuani is vulnerable to being KO'd. You take a look at his 10 losses. He's been knocked out 4 times. Almost half of his losses come by way of KO. I think that Zaleski dos Santos is alive to land a KO. I have a feeling that there's going to be a high pace to this fight. I'm going to say dos Santos gets a finish here. Okay, I wouldn't be shocked if it goes to a decision. I wouldn't be shocked if Njokuani hangs in there, and especially on the feet, and keeps it competitive with his length and his skills there. He'll have a 7-inch reach advantage. Even if he keeps it standing, though, I still lean Zaleski's way. And just with him mixing up everything, just pushing the pace, I think that he's the more complete fighter. I like Zaleski dos Santos to get the job done. I think he finds a finish. I think Zaleski finds a finish here. And we'll take a look at the line here. He's a -200. He's a 2-1 favorite. I don't think that line's way off, like I talked about some of these earlier lines, but I think that it is a little high. I think you could definitely argue that the value's on the underdog in Chidi. I've been watching Chidi for a long time. I've been watching his brother from way back in the day, Anthony Njokuani. I believe Anthony, his older brother. He fought at in the lower weight classes. I think he was a featherweight, but both the Njokuani brothers, man, have lightning quick and very technical striking. They just never really rounded their overall game out, and I think that Zaleski will prove to be the more well-rounded fighter. Give me Zaleski by ground and pound finish. Hey guys, real quick, not to interrupt the video, but if anyone's looking to work with me for my official plays, you guys know you can reach out to me. Go shoot me a message on IG or Twitter, or email me as well. It's been popping up periodically below. And I also want to say thank you for tuning in. Please smash that like button, subscribe, and I appreciate you guys a lot, man. Thank you. And that takes us to the main event. It's a rematch. This time it's a 5-rounder, though. All right, so we got 2 more rounds in the fight to actually solidify who won the fight. The last one was very controversial. A lot of people thought that Dolidze should have taken that fight, although it was a unanimous decision for Vettori. I thought Vettori clearly took 2 of the 3 rounds. Maybe I shouldn't say clearly, but I thought he took 2 of the 3 rounds. And I understand that Dolidze did land some damaging strikes. So even though he was outstruck 106 to 71, yeah, Dolidze was landing the heavier strikes, which we've seen him do in the cage often. All right, he throws powerful strikes. I think that Dolidze comes into this fight with a lot of momentum. Even when you take a look at the Nasruddin Imavov fight, right, that was a fight that went 25 minutes, and he had his moments in there too, just showing that he can go to war with a fighter like Imavov. Okay, with the level of fighter that Imavov is, that's impressive. And then before that was the Vettori fight that some people thought that he won. Before that, he KOs Jack Hermanson. Jack Hermanson still going out there, showcasing his abilities. He just upset Joe Pyfer. I mean, if you take a look at his line of work, it's actually quite impressive. Knocked out Phil Hawes in the first round, knocked out Kyle Dawkins in the first round. Right, that was really the beginning of the momentum that Roman had, where people were really taking note of what he was doing in the cage, right? And then taking note of what he's doing outside the cage too, snagging UFC fighters' girls from the gym, if you guys remember that whole story. And you know what? It's been a long time. I could probably just quickly, talk about that. I think I kind of have, but JP Bays, I talked to that dude, man. His girl, I don't know, maybe I won't get into it, but he snagged a wife, not a girl. He snagged someone's wife from the gym, and I got the whole inside scoop there. So that kind of shows you what kind of dude Dolidze is, but I don't know all the details, bro. But if someone's married, whether they want to be with the other person or not, you probably shouldn't be snagging their wife up and then impregnating her, which is what he did. But maybe it's helping his fighting abilities because he's been looking good. And, we get to the last two fights, knocked out Kevin Holland. I don't put as much stock into that Holland victory as maybe some would. I'm going to be brutally honest, right? Kevin Holland, even though we have our issues, Kevin Holland is a fighter he's a high level fighter, but I don't think that he's giving the fight game his all. He just has a lot of quit in him when he's in there. He's constantly looking for a way out. It's like he just wants to get his paycheck, and that's going to catch up with him because pretty quickly he's going to be cut by the UFC. I mean, what has he won? Like out of his last 6 fights. You can't hold a UFC career taking L's like that. So I don't know where he's going to find money. I know he kind of has a name for himself. He's in commercials and whatnot, but if you're not fighting in the UFC, why would anybody pay any attention to Holland? So he should probably quickly become broke or be an MMA trainer or something like that. But I don't put too much stock into that victory. I like the fact he went up and and took out Anthony Smith, but Anthony Smith, the fighter that's on the decline, but he comes in with some momentum here. The fact that we have 25 more minutes to see who's the better fighter, I think that it could favor Vettori to an extent. I think that Vettori shows to have very good conditioning. He took that third round, right? If you run the numbers back in the third round, he outstruck Dolidze 40-26. The fact that this is a 5-rounder, it's kind of hard to put your finger on who that benefits more so. Vettori shows up in great shape. He has good cardio and conditioning. We've seen Dolidze go 25 minutes. If you run back that third round, when they most recently fought, it was Vettori that was outlanding Dolidze 40-26. So maybe in the later rounds, it's Vettori that's actually picking up the pace and outlanding Dolidze there. I'm kind of attached to the Vettori side here because I did have a little bit of money on him in that first fight, and I thought that he showed to be game. And the fact that he's been out of the cage for some time, maybe that will do him a service here. Maybe that will actually benefit him, right? Because it has been a while since he was in there. It was back in 2023, mid-year, where he lost to Jared Cannonier, which we see that Cannonier is still an absolute beast. So we know that loss doesn't look that bad. His other loss was a Robert Whittaker decision loss. Whittaker, one of the most high-level fighters in this division. Vettori still has a lot of skills that he brings to the cage. And the fact that he's just 31, if he could just adjust his mindset, if he can get hungry here and get a lot of motivation behind him, I think that he can still go out there and showcase what he showcased for a long time, which is that he's a very well-rounded and technical fighter that can outpoint you. He just checks off a lot of boxes, man. He'll be a step ahead of you and just mix things up. And we've seen him do that to fighters like Paulo Costa, Kevin Holland, Jack Hermanson, Cesar Ferreira, Andrew Sanchez, some of these fighters from back in the day in the middleweight division that their name carried a little bit more weight, but respectable fighters. And I think that Vettori can show up once again and get his hand raised. I got to lean towards the Vettori side because another big factor here is that Dolidze has a lot of success knocking fighters out. 8 of his 14 victories come by way of KO. Vettori still has never been KO'd, okay? So Dolidze leans heavily on his KO power. Neither of these fighters have been KO'd. I expect this fight to go 25 minutes. Both of these fighters have granite chins. They're going to go at it, and I think that the volume of Vettori pays dividends, and he gets his hand raised once again. Maybe a split decision this time. Another close fight, but I like Vettori with his youth and with him taking that break from the fight game. I think he comes back hungry to make one more run, and we will see that Vettori is a minus 140 favorite. Okay, open up as a minus 135. We're seeing some slight action come in on him. And let's take a look. Where did he settle in when they faced off the last time, right? He came into the Cannonier fight as a minus 150 favorite. He was a minus 235 against Dolidze the last time they faced off. So he is a fighter that does get a lot of respect put on his name. I mean, you look, all those victories that he's had, dating all the way back to the Cesar Ferreira fight, he was a dog. But all those other ones, he's typically the favorite. In fights that he's winning, he delivers. If he's a dog, he's fighting someone like Israel Adesanya or something like that. So he's a very professional fighter. Give me Marvin Vettori to get the job done, and I cannot say that line's out of reach. I mean, that's a very close line there. I think the value is debatably there. I mean, you're chalking up a little bit. The -140, it's a close fight, but Vettori is the more game and complete fighter, in my opinion. I think that he squeaks by with another close decision victory. All right, guys, that's going to wrap this one up. I hope all is well with you guys. Hope everything's going smooth for you. Hope you're cashing in on these events. Hopefully none of you guys are blowing too much money on the fights, because don't forget, guys, you got to be cautious and intelligent with your sports betting, dude, with your MMA betting, right? Don't be one of those dudes that's just blowing all your money, chasing losses. I try to bring that up here and there because I know that I know there has to be someone out there that's listening to this that's going through that, right? We're in a sports betting community. I've been there before throughout the years. Luckily, I've polished myself up there. I try to be more mature. If I take a little loss, I take a little break. I slow things down. I look for a new target. But I remember, especially early on in my sports betting career, how it was chasing losses. And I also know how it could be to go on a losing skid. Luckily, I haven't had to deal with that over the past year. We've been very hot, but a couple of years back, I've had some moments where we've gone on some bad skids. I just took 2 very rough split losses over the past couple cards. Luckily, we hit other targets, but still took some tough split losses. We had Ribovics to win via decision there. We had him on the money line as well. Didn't go our way. The vast majority of the MMA world had him winning that fight. Had the Gene Matsumoto money line play that didn't cash for us. That the vast majority of the MMA world had him winning that fight. But it is what it is. You don't run back to your book and just start hammering reckless plays. That's the point I'm making here. Slow it down, guys. You're here for the long haul. Hopefully you're enjoying betting on sports. So just, be intelligent with your spending. I'll tell you guys that. I'll leave you with that. Hope you all have a great week. Hope you have a great weekend, and I hope you profit on the card. Signing out. Teller.
The teller.